Hey, this is Kaja Elliott, Bronx born and raised, ATL made, Bay Area becoming, and this is the As Told By podcast. All right, another episode of the As Told By podcast. Once again, this is Kaja. And this is an interesting episode today because usually when I interview people, I know them, I've been following them for a while, and I know some things about them. But this is a little bit different. So I'm going to let my guest introduce herself first, and then I'll explain to y'all why this is a little different. Again, this week's sponsor slash co-host is Oakland. I don't know if you heard that outside, per usual. But yes, please go ahead, introduce yourself.
Hi, thank you for having me. My name is Lilian Duran. I've been a photographer for 10 years. I'm new to the food business. I own Clandestina Cocina, a new catering, traditional Cuban food business in the Bay Area. And yeah, I moved here from Cuba about 6 years ago. And yeah, thank you for having me.
So thank you, Lily, for coming up. So here's a story on how Lily and I got connected. So I'm on Instagram. The West Oakland Farmers Market was just getting started, and I saw her post from her business page, Clandestina Cocina. And it was Cuban food. And I was so excited to see it because there was a Cuban restaurant I used to patronize out in San Mateo. They closed, and I hadn't been able to find Cuban food in the East Bay. And I didn't feel like going to the city or to the peninsula to get it. So I sent her a message, and I'm like, oh, Cuban food, great. You know, I have to come out and try your food. And she sent me back a message. It was like, my food is really authentic. You know, I just immigrated here from Cuba in the last 6 years. And I was like, oh. And to me, immediately I thought, oh, she's got a story to tell. So I'm like, hey, well, you know I don't know you. I just kind of messaged you through Instagram, but I have a podcast. And do you think, you would like to come up and let me interview you? And she said yes. So thank you so much.
Of course. Thank you for inviting me.
Yes. It's so nice to have you here. And I ran into you last weekend. It was, you shared with me your first weekend at the West Oakland Farmers Market as a vendor. Yeah.
Yeah.
How was it?
It was really good. It's been really good. A lot of people is excited to see a Cuban vendor in the area.
Yeah.
It's been awesome how many people run into me and they are like, my grandfather was Cuban or like my dad was Cuban, and they are like loving the food and like it's bringing memories to them. So it's been really awesome.
Yeah, the memories with food, that's almost as good as eating the food. So we can jump right in. I was just saying that the thing that really hooked me when we talked on Instagram quickly a few weeks back was that you said you had immigrated from Cuba 6 years ago, and that immediately made me curious about your food, the authenticity of your food, and your story. And so, being born and raised in Cuba, I think that many of us probably have a pretty limited perspective about what that experience would have been, since we primarily associate Cuba with political, right? And then the recent advent of tourism now that it's open to some degree for tourism. But talk to me a bit about what it was like to grow up there.
Well, it's definitely very different. I feel like for every Cuban, we kind of all have like different backgrounds and different stories. I was raised in the capital, and then my dad in the early 2000. I like to say that he was one of the first people doing Airbnb because at the time it didn't exist.
Okay.
And my dad I come from like an entrepreneurial family. So at the time he decided to stop working for the government. And then he started doing renting our house, like pretty much doing Airbnb that at the time it was not a thing. So I grew up like seeing and like co-hosting with my dad, people from like all over the world. And my dad he's an amazing cook. So we used to offer for our clients like dinners and breakfast. And when my parents got divorced, I stayed with my dad. So I was raised by a single dad.
Okay.
And I used to like help him decorating and plating the breakfast, and I used to always do the salads. And so I grew up helping my dad in the kitchen, learning all his recipes. The same with my mom and my grandma. Like the kitchen has always been like a happy place in my house. That is the place that everybody like connects. And then, as I was saying, yeah, since the early 2000s, like I've been around people from all over the world. That made me very curious too, of like, like traveling and see what else was out there that is very limited for us in Cuba. Having like very little resources, it's really hard to get out the country, like to travel is really hard.
Yes.
We had very limited access to internet until like few years ago. So yeah, it was definitely very different for me growing up there and when I moved here.
Yeah. So that's an interesting point you make about the limited access to internet, right? So maybe the way some people would see certain things, see certain programming, find certain information online, and be inspired to go down a particular career path. I'm assuming that probably was not the case for you. So how did you get from the inspiration of just being in this space with your dad, hosting people, cooking, and just enjoying it within a family unit, to thinking about maybe this is something you might want to do as a business?
So I start when I was like introducing myself. I start by saying that I was a photographer for 10 years.
Yes.
And that's something for some time. I start like saying I used to be a photographer, but I recently picked that up again because somebody told me like, you are that, you're never going to stop being an artist. Back in Cuba, I have a degree in computer science, and after that, I decided to go into photography and arts. I work for like different galleries, and my work as an artist, it was about like feminism and the body and all that. That's one of the reasons why I left Cuba too, because my art started being like censored.
Really?
In there. And so back in Cuba, like cooking, it was just something that I could do good. I love cooking for my family, for my friends, for us. Food is like a love language. If you get into my house, in my grandma's house, she would be like, "Do you eat?" That's the first question.
And your answer better be, "No, I didn't," and get ready to.
Yeah,
yes.
And then so back in Cuba, I never thought about food as a business. I was completely into arts then, but I was very young. So at a time, I had my parents that could like support me, and I was like doing arts for the love of arts.
Okay.
I was like not making any money or like very little money with it. Then I moved to the States, and of course, at a time, things changed. I was 24, and then I needed to start like working in here to make a living, pay rent, pay all my bills.
All the stuff.
I was lucky enough to find a job that I had until like very recent as a contract doing portraits for like kids and sports. So that was good because I was able to still, work with a camera. Not what I like. I had to like jump in and do commercial work where before I refused to do. But it was a good way to like make a living still doing photography.
Yes.
But then when I first moved here in 2016, I live with family. I live with my cousin. She took me in when I moved from Cuba. And I live with her and her two kids. And her two kids go to a school here in Oakland that is called EBI, Escuela Bilingüe Internacional.
Okay.
My family kind of helped opening that school.
Oh, wow.
So when they were always very involved with like doing fundraisings for the school and all of this. So when I first moved here, as you were saying, people is very curious about Cuba.
Yeah.
So we organized like a night in Havana style of
give people
event.
a little taste.
So I did like a big exhibition of my photos, and then just because I was like very excited, I would say like I can cook too. So I ended up cooking for 50 people. That was my very first time cooking for a large crowd. So I did this dinner for like 50 people. They came in. Some of them purchased some of my photos. I donated the money to the school. And everybody was like so hype about the food and like trying to get my recipes. And that was like kind of the first time And when Clandestina started, like the name came from that night of everybody asking me like things about Cuba and the economy and how you get things there. And I was like, it's so hard to explain still things
Yeah.
because Cuba is like a parallel universe. And I was like, you have to get everything is clandestine. Like everything works in the black market. Like you have to like get things and do many legal things in Cuba. It's how it goes.
Here too. Mm-hmm.
So that's where the Clandestina came from. And at the time I was like, oh, maybe this is something that I could do for a living, make money out of my food, and then this will allow me to do arts without having to worry about money.
Got it. Got it. So you had your hand in quite a few things. Computer science, photography, cooking, right? Hosting, right? Like Airbnb, pre-Airbnb. So it's interesting to think of all the things you were juggling and then to see what has actually taken root. 6 years ago was 2016. We all kind of know what was going on, what the landscape in the U.S. was at that time with the impending election that would go on to become the Trump presidency. And, of course, immigration was a huge topic of that presidency, of that campaign and that administration. Even with the Bay Area being this super liberal environment, I would think that there was some effect just given the attitudes that were kind of out in the ether about immigration at the time. So being a person who was newly immigrated to the country, what were those first few years like? And did you feel any of that impact?
Yeah, so the first few, I think I came to a place that is way more welcoming than others, I would say. I was extremely lucky to come straight from Havana to Oakland. I feel like extremely lucky.
Yeah.
So one of the first things that I had to do that it was part, at a time, still there were like a special law for Cubans when I arrived. That changed like few months after, of course, that Trump came to a presidency. But at a time when I first came in, I had to go to like an English school. And that was like really interesting because I got to be with all these people from like all over the world that were immigrants too. And that eased up a little bit like my experience as an immigrant in here. And then I feel like the Bay Area and especially is a place so diverse. Like there is people from everywhere.
Everywhere.
Here. Like even the Americans are not even from Oakland. They're from, like,
no, I'm not from Oakland either. This is from everywhere. Yes.
Like people live from everywhere. So I feel like in that sense, I felt very welcome. At the same time, like here and there are people that don't even know where Cuba is and have like very
just
particular
limited
and
knowledge,
interesting assumptions of where is Cuba, or like I don't know, people that will ask me at the beginning, I don't know if I even knew what a computer was because they think that we are like, I know that we
I have a computer science degree. Thank you.
Yeah, I said that because in the first week, a person asked me something like that because for some people, like we are very like back. Like we're limited, but we're still in the universe.
Right, we're still in the same century with everyone else.
Yeah.
Right.
So, but yes, after like I don't know, like everybody has been like very helpful to me, like just to help me, making myself in a way like things are like very different. At the beginning, I didn't know what a credit card was, or because we don't use credit cards.
So wait. So no credit systems. So you either have the cash to pay, or you do some variation. I would think of maybe like a barter system. Like we'll do this because we have this ability, so we can produce A for you, and in exchange for that, you'll give me B.
You can, but that's you can get to that kind of like agreement in like black market or something like that. But even right now, there are things in the economy that I don't understand because we have multiple currencies.
Okay.
And currencies that we don't get paid in. And when you go to the store, you have to pay in that one. So it's kind of like crazy. And it's really hard even for myself to understand like the type of change that they have right now.
Okay.
But yes, so I was raised in a way, and my dad is an economist.
Mm-hmm.
So I was raised in a way that you have your cash and you use the money that you have. You don't count with money that you don't have. So
That's gonna go a long way for you.
yeah, no, imagine like my first year and a half, 2 years, I didn't even want to get a credit card because I was scared to get a credit card. I was like,
This is not real money.
that's not real money. That's not my money.
Right.
How I'm going to use that? So it was hard for me to understand that I needed to create a credit to then like get an apartment or like start a business or.
Yes. It's amazing when you say that, because I think for the number of U.S. born people who just have a lot of opinions about people immigrating to this country, they would not last 6 months if it was the reverse. I think sometimes we've been so spoon fed, to your point. Oh, it's not my money. I'll just get a credit card and swipe, and maybe I can pay it back and maybe I can't.
Yeah.
To have to go to another country and kind of start from fundamentals, I just think so many people, let me send you to another country and see how you do. It might not be as good as you think. So I have much respect for people who are able to come here and, make something of it. And to that point, for a really long time, people, you hear it like with immigration stories, people have really held up coming to the U.S. as this perfect ideal where the sky is the limit. And, I would assume to some degree there's some truth in that. But, especially recently, we all know that this country is highly flawed, right? Particularly when it comes to the experiences of Black and brown people. So do you think that there are assumptions that get made as far as better or worse when it comes to the societal norms of America versus other countries?
Well, I'm going to talk from the Cuban perspective just because there is so much immigration. Like, we're right now immigrating to anywhere in the world because we just want to be out of the island pretty much.
Yeah.
But since the early 60s, like, there have been a lot of Cuban immigration to the United States and mostly to Florida. So there are a lot of assumptions that come from this Cuban community in Florida. In some ways, sometimes, like, and it's sad that I'm going to say this, but these days I sometimes tell people that is in Cuba, like, think about it, like, because people go to Miami and they are not even like in a good social status or anything like that, but they go to Cuba bragging of things that they probably don't have because they have a lot of debt in credit cards or things, but they are like making the people that is in Cuba that don't have internet or have like very limited access to everything.
It sounds amazing.
Yeah, so for them it's like, oh, it sounds amazing. And then some people come to United States that is really hard to come in here, and a lot of them are doing it in like a very risk ways these days, like crossing through bunch of borders and like coming from Nicaragua to Mexico to then like cross through the river, and it's really dangerous. And they are like making all the risk, bringing their kids, their elders, just because there is no hope over there.
Yeah.
But sometimes it's like, as you were saying, like all these assumptions that it's going to be amazing, because they were that believe American dream that a lot of Cubans came in the 80s and the 70s and they built businesses and stuff, but the economy has changed, the government has changed, times have changed, and I don't think it's the same anymore. It's like really hard. Like right now for me, as starting a business, sometimes some nights I go to bed and I'm like, I'm putting myself in a lot of risk by doing this, because you don't never know.
It's not easy.
It's not easy, and there is some, I would say there is some like luck, strike of luck in there too. You
never know.
You never know if it's gonna work or not.
Yeah. Well, I'll tell you, to the point of luck, what I think you're really lucky to come across. I read that you're part of La Cocina Incubator Program, which I was so happy to read that, because I've heard amazing things about them. And shout out to De La Creamery. I think they're a member
she's
too.
One of my cohort
Yes,
too.
and the elote ice cream
Oh, that's my favorite.
that I love. It's just so Good. I'm like, elote, ice cream. And I went home and put tajin on it. So, yes,
That's my favorite
big
flavor
fan
too.
of them.
Yeah.
And I've heard such wonderful things about La Cocina. So, tell me how, well, first, tell folks a little bit
Mhm.
about what it is and then how you got involved. And what has your experience been getting that level of guidance for your business? And what does it mean to you to be a part of this program that is so focused on creating
Mhm.
visibility for Latinas and just women of color in general?
Yeah, so La Cocina, they have been around for about 18 years. There are many really successful businesses like restaurants that
Mm-hmm.
are based in the Bay Area, that they are owned and led by women, all of them like immigrants. They do an amazing job of supporting you through the whole process, like reaching your goals, like reaching to your vision. They have like lower rates, kitchens, commercial kitchens that you can use, and many other like resources that they put in your hands.
Mm-hmm.
I was like very lucky. In the past 2 years, I've been working some other things that I do. I work at an office as well, an optometry office in Emeryville.
Okay.
The people that I work for, they're amazing people. She is one of the owner. She's a chef as well,
Okay.
and she was the one that recommended me to go to La Cocina. Um, the first I was going to apply last year, but I guess I was not ready because I didn't like really believe that my food could be, like a business. I
Mm-hmm.
was like doing it for friends and family members that would ask me to cater for their parties or like, but always like very small things out of my kitchen,
Yeah.
my home. So when I went to La Cocina and they offered me like an in-person interview, that was like I was shocked because I honestly never thought that they were going to like reach back to me. And then when I went to my in-person interview, everybody there was like, it's an amazing place. Like all the support and like the community that is being created there is like is one of my favorite things. Like I
Mm-hmm.
went to my interview and there were other people working in the kitchen and like without know me, like everybody was like, "Good luck, you got this." Like you look, you know what you're doing. Like everybody was like already so supportive and like
Mm-hmm.
happy to have you there. So that meant a lot for me. And now I get to learn and push through my business with like five
Yes.
other amazing women that are in my cohort, part of this year's program. And yeah, I'm pretty excited to see what the future brings with this opportunity.
Yeah. I'm so
Hmm.
glad to hear that you're a part of that.
Yeah.
A lot of success stories coming out of there.
Hmm.
Well, now we want to talk a little bit about the food, right? The
Yeah.
actual food. So you told us about kind of what the inspiration was and how it came about, and you mentioned the influence of family
Hmm.
on the food that you make. Your dad, you said, was an amazing cook. When you think about Cuban food, when you think about the food that you make, what do you want people who take it to understand about what the family representation of that is?
Well, first, I'm trying to stay very close to traditions.
Mm-hmm.
My food is not like it's nothing fancy. It's
This is not modern
yeah,
Cuban,
it's not
nouveau
yeah,
Cuban.
it's not because most there are like a couple of other Cuban inspired Cuban places or like
Mm-hmm.
Cuban restaurants in the Bay, but they are their intake of the Cuban Californian vibe, I would say.
Farm to table Cuban.
No, like there is farm to table in Cuba, like all
Mm-hmm.
the like in the center of the country, like in the farms, and but our food is very very simple
Mm-hmm.
because the ingredients that we have are very very limited.
Okay.
We do have like a few staples like that are all included in my menu, like the ropa vieja that people love,
Yes.
lechon, the chicken that is my dad's recipe. But then there are many other like I call Cuban cuisine is like a necessity cuisine.
Mm.
So whatever you have in the fridge,
Put it
that's what you
together.
have to put it
Work it
together
out.
and make a dish.
Yes.
So that's kind of what I want to like bring in as well. Is just that sense of like I always think about my grandma. So, you know, that feeling of like Sunday family lunch, late lunch, that you eat so much that then you are like, I cannot eat anymore. Now I need a nap. That's kind of the feeling that I like people to take with my food.
You want them to have the itis. Okay, yeah, just eat up till you can't move. Yes. As a newly emerging food pop up, and what's becoming an increasingly competitive space, there's so many pop ups post COVID, even pre COVID, but certainly post COVID, so many pop up food outlets with really good food. Besides buying the actual food, what are some other ways you feel the Bay Area community can support your growth and the growth of entrepreneurs like you?
Well, I feel like sharing, telling their friends. I have found, honestly, that the food industry, perhaps what opinions people have, in my experience, the food community that I have found, and mostly are women's, they're so supportive. Everybody's so supportive. Like, we have been like going to each other's pop-ups, like offering help. Like, I don't have a pop-up this week. Do you need help in yours?
Oh,
Or
nice.
like, yeah. And coming from like the photography and the arts industry, completely different. Like, there is so much like competition and like people trying not to share resources and all that. And I have found a completely different world in the food industry these days. So I feel like, come if you can. If you cannot come, tell your friends. Share, post.
Send somebody if you
Yeah.
can't come.
These days, it seems like social media is kind of like one of our biggest friends.
Yeah, I find
So-
out so much stuff on Instagram.
Yeah, I have to get better at it. Honestly, I'm ashamed because being a photographer for so long, people is like, oh, you should have like an amazing feed, but it's like such a different like perspective, and like I'm used to do portraits and other kind of photography.
Not no daggone reels.
Yeah, and the whole thing like with the reels, like that's for young people. Like,
Oh
I
gosh,
was like,
the
oh my
reels.
God,
I'm
the
telling you,
TikTok, oh
it can
my
take
God.
you a whole. It can take you a whole hour to put a decent reel together. And who has? I guess you have to find the time, but who has the time on the regular basis? It's just. It's a lot. So to the people who are or have social media managers, bless you.
Yeah, 100%.
You're needed. You're needed. Where can people find you if they want to try the food?
Well, these days they can find me every Sunday at the West Oakland Farmers Market from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. And definitely follow me on my social medias. I'm in Instagram as Clandestina Cocina Berkeley, and then I will be posting there like all pop-ups and events that comes up.
Yes, I am loving. I think we're in like week 4 or maybe 5 of the West Oakland Farmers Market. I love it. We were talking about the fact that there's a real community feel there. Yes, there are fruits and vegetables. Yes, you should be there to
Yeah.
get your fruits and vegetables, please. But there are also so many good prepared
Yeah.
foods and food vendors. It's an amazing place to come spend a Sunday morning. So West Oakland Farmers Market at 18th and Peralta on Sundays from, I believe it's 10 to 2
10 to 2.
is the time. Well, I'm
It's
looking.
live music too.
Yes, and the music is
Yeah,
good.
The music is always
Some
so
of the farmers
good.
market, I'm like, no shade to
Yeah.
bluegrass, but I'm like, I'm gonna die a slow bluegrass
Yeah.
death. But not at West Oakland. They had like a youth group that was playing all live instruments. Someone was doing like soul and funk singing
Yeah.
one weekend. So it's been really amazing. I'm so glad that you're there. I want everybody who listens to this podcast episode to really get behind this business, follow, support, come out, try the food.
Yeah, please.
If you come on a particular Sunday and I'm at the farmer's market, I just might feel like being nice and buy you some food. Don't hold me to it. It's one person. The first person to ask me will get it, and that's it. But I'm so glad that you came and talked to me today. I can't wait to see what comes up for you, how this evolves, how your business grows. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me and for this amazing conversation. And for
Yes.
listening to my story too.
Absolutely. If you want to follow me on social media and get to know me a bit better, you can follow me on IG at Kaja versus Kaja. That's KAHJA_VS_KAHJA. That's this week's episode of the As Told by podcast. Peace.